Did you know that half Americans over 50 are single? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is dating coach and author Sandy Weiner. We're going to talk about love at last, and it all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and we're on UK Health Radio all weekend long. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, it is the interview portion of our show, and I'm pleased to bring back a special guest, Sandy Weiner. Sandy is an amazing Chief Love Officer at Last First Date. She's a TEDx speaker, dating and relationship coach, author, and podcast host. Her approach to coaching is holistic, encompassing a hybrid mix of life coaching, neurolinguistic programming, and nonviolent communication. Of course, author of Becoming a Woman of Value, How to Thrive in Life and Love, Choice Points in Dating, Empowering Women to Make Healthier Decisions in Love, Love at Last, True Stories of Falling in Love Later in Life. And we're going to talk about that today. And she also hosts two podcasts, Last First Date Radio and the Women of Value podcast. And Sandy believes, and I agree, that it's never too late to have the love of your life you want. Welcome back to Guys Radio, Sandy Weiner.
Thank you so much, Robert. So happy to be back.
So the book is about real couples who found love later in life. And it's possible because I was single until I was 50, and I met my wife on Match.com. She winked at me, and we got together, and that was it. So it can be done. We've been together for, 15 years, and so it's all going strong. So very pleased with that. So you have 18 stories in the book. I'm holding it up for our YouTube and Rumble audience. And there's love lessons at the end of each chapter, which I really like. So let's start at the big macro picture. What is it about people that are having trouble, I think, getting to like a second date when they're over 50?
Wow, that's a big question. There's so many reasons why. First of all, I want to say congratulations on finding your love at last and not giving up, because so many people do. And so I think there are many things at play when people don't get past a second date. Some people don't even get to a first date. And I think that if you're dating online, for example, a lot of people just have no idea what they're doing. Their profile, their bio is not unique. So they're very cliche. I'm actually giving a webinar tomorrow night on this topic. 5 mistakes people make. Yeah, their profiles are all full of little, I want my partner in crime. I mean, everybody sounds the same. So if you're not putting anything out there that actually sounds like you uniquely, you're going to attract the wrong people, most likely. And then most people give up on dating because they have a lack of success. So your pictures aren't right. You're posting old pictures. You're posting a mix of pictures. I know for women and men, your hair is different lengths and different colors and different styles. And people like, oh, who are you? I don't really know who I'm going to meet. Or 20 pounds ago, or whatever it is, or with your ex-wife or ex-husband cropped out, and you can tell like you're in a wedding scene. I mean, I remember seeing a picture of somebody's license as their profile photo with their license picture taken right off the license. Like, come on, like put a little effort in. And then there's the messaging. People have no idea how to message each other. They don't know how to get offline. I mean, the purpose of online dating is to get off line dating. And so it's just to serve as a connection. And so I think people really misuse it. They don't really understand that if you're not looking for a pen pal, you've got to take action. And so you've got that first date, and maybe first date conversation goes too deep, too heavy. You're concentrating on the past stuff. You're going into your medical problem. I mean, I have heard it all on a first date. That is not sexy. And neither is talking about, your narcissistic parent. That is not first date conversation. So knowing how to date, who to date, all that stuff, I covered all that in my second book, Choice Points in Dating. That's just like how we think about dating. That makes a big difference. It makes people want to ask you out again and again.
Do the folks who come to you for your work, do they have similar issues, and is it more women than men?
I do work mostly with women.
Okay.
They have similar issues. I would say I attract a lot of people who have patterns that they don't really see in dating. They know that it's not working for them. They maybe had a few failed marriages, definitely failed relationships. Sometimes they haven't had a relationship in a long time. Some of them are widowed and don't know how to get started. So a lot of people are overwhelmed. I get a lot of people who are very anxiously attached, and so they're very anxious about every step of the way, and they're people pleasers, learning how to stop focusing on other people, focus on themselves, and making themselves happy. Finding a life outside of dating. I mean, I help people with that. I've helped people who started out with me, let's say after being widowed, and they realized they had other stuff in their life that they needed to take care of. Like one had to hire a nanny. And I helped her hire a nanny using the same formula I would help her to use to look for a mate, which is your must-have and deal breaker lists and knowing the right questions to ask. I mean, it's really looking for an apartment. I've helped people move homes. I've helped people, it's all the same. Like if you are clear with who you are and what you want and need, then you are going to be really discerning.
Mhm. You
And
know,
so, yeah.
let me let's go a little deeper on that, because sometimes I think that a lot of people don't know, they don't trust they're not in touch with, or they don't trust their feelings. There's a lot of, when I read the book, a lot of people, it seemed like they were in their head when it came to dating, and not enough in their heart. I know for
Mhm.
myself that I had to have the epiphany of looking inside and saying, I haven't made room for somebody else. And as soon as I did that, everything changed. I realized it was just all about me. And I think most of us, we live in our head instead of, and my wife actually taught me this, about just going along with, how do you feel about this? How do you feel when you're with this other person, a new person? And trusting that more than the checklist and everything else, because there's going to be a lot of variables, particularly if you're over 40. But I think a lot of people, and I want to get your take on this, they're not in touch with their feelings, their own feelings, not the feeling of somebody else, but their own feelings. What do you think, Sandy?
100%. I mean, I think you've hit on one of the biggest issues. I personally was like that as well. And we don't grow up being attuned with our parents, most of us, where our parents actually check in with, how do you feel about that? Most of us grew up with feelings being, knocked out of us. Don't cry. You'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Don't be nervous. Well, what if I am nervous? It's okay if I'm nervous. It's okay to say, hey, get on a date and say, I'm really nervous. I haven't been on a date in a long time. I was kind of scared to meet you. That's endearing,
Mhm.
right? So speaking, not again, no verbal diarrhea, but like speak your feelings. And I teach a whole course on communication skills, and I teach communication skills, but first you have to know who you are, what your value system is, what do you want to protect with boundaries, but like tuning into your body, into your feelings. So I help people make that checklist using their feelings. It's really, how do you want to feel around this person, and who do they need to be for you to feel that way? That's really all it is. So if you want to feel emotionally safe around a person, who do they have to be? Well, they have to be a good communicator. They have to be able to handle conflict. They have to be emotionally intelligent, right? So financial security, a lot of people want somebody to be financially secure. What does that mean? Right? It's a safety issue. So not everybody is financially secure. That doesn't mean they're not responsible. So how do you want to feel around them financially? I want to feel financially safe. What does that mean to you? That they've put away money for retirement, that they are not, don't have a lot of credit that they're not paying down, whatever it is, it's really about responsibility.
Yeah, that's a great points, all great points. So there's a lot of variables. Let's talk about some of the variables that people over a certain age have to deal with when they're getting back out there, like kids. Sometimes one person has kids, the other person doesn't. Sometimes one person's been married, the other person hasn't. how do you advise your clients and folks out there in general when they're embarking on the dating over 40 to deal with some of the variables that are going to come up?
Talk about everything, and make agreements. So if you are blending families, for example, or you're dating somebody with children, you don't have kids, you may not understand their connection
Right.
with their kids. Sometimes people's connection with their kids is unhealthy. They have no boundaries. Their kids are determining everything and they come above the person they're dating. That's problematic. So speak up. Say, here's what I'm noticing. I'm feeling neglected when you drop everything while we're on a date to go back and bring your 18-year-old kid food when they can drive, like talk about this stuff. I've had clients where the relationship almost ended because they didn't know how to deal with it. One had kids, the other one didn't. And a lot of times they don't realize that they're enabling their children. And so that's a really big issue. I mean, I think that could be very divisive when a parent overindulges to the detriment of their relationship. But talk about it. Talk about how can you negotiate these things? How does the person act when you bring up hard things? Do they shut down? Do they get defensive? Are they open? The openness is huge. Are they willing to talk about it? The willingness is what you're looking for.
Mhm. Great answers. Sandy Weiner, my special guest, dating coach extraordinaire and author of the new book, Love at Last, True Stories of Falling in Love Later in Life. Um, Men and women, correct me if I'm wrong, seem to communicate a little bit differently. And a lot of the book and a lot of your perspective is about communication. And a lot of times the women, they want to talk about everything. I notice this with my wife, and sometimes guys, if they have a problem, they'll bring it up. If they don't bring something up, you can kind of make an assumption that they're pretty happy, they're okay. That's an assumption, or they've just shut down and they're not interested anymore. How do you coach your clients about the differences between how men and women often communicate?
I teach a whole course on that too, because it's such an important topic. Yeah, I think that when we understand each other, we stop expecting the other person to be exactly like us. And I
Right.
would say it's not even about communication between men and women, it's everyone. We walk around in life thinking everybody speaks the way we do, will understand what we're saying without explaining all of those things. So I think some of the things that I teach women is that men tend to talk less. They'll talk in headlines, we talk in story.
Mhm.
And so if a man is losing focus, then I suggest that he just asks her to get to the point, to ask her what she wants from him in terms of a response. Because I mean, my son does this with me. Sometimes I'll be telling him a story and he has no idea where I'm going with it, and he loses focus, and he'll say, "Mom, I'm lost. Can you tell me where you're going?" And that's not mean. It's just helping me understand how he's listening. We all need to know how the other person listens and communicates. So that's one example. I mean, there are so many others. I think women tend to multitask more. And so I used to talk to my ex-husband while he was on the phone because I could do that. And he didn't hear a word I said. Or if a man is watching a football game and you're talking at him while he's trying to focus, it's not a good time. So just asking, is this a good time? Or can you tell me when it would be a better time, instead of feeling frustrated that you're talking to somebody who's not paying attention, who's not listening. So many arguments and misunderstandings can be solved by just understanding each other. We all have operating systems that are different from each other. And the more we share, I'm an introvert, you're an extrovert, I need quiet time, you need to be out more. Let's figure out how to make this work.
Oh, that's again so much wisdom. Sandy Weiner. Emotionally readiness for a relationship. From my experience, and this is just anecdotal, I noticed when I was on Match.com for a while back in the day that every once in a while I'd meet somebody who was their first time dating online. And it always was turned out to be, except with my wife, who was on for a 3-day free trial, and she winked at me. She had no idea how the whole thing worked. But I found that previous to that, most of the women I met who were not ready to date, that if it was their first time, if I was their first match meeting, they were not ready to date. They were like browsing. They were like just figuring out, what is this? How does this thing work? But they weren't ready. So they were kind of wasting my time. So those things were like one-offs. How do you advise and how do you kind of read your clients to know if they're emotionally, because I think that's the key word here, ready to get out there and date? Like some people they want a partner, but they may not be ready to get into the mix.
Yeah, we all enter dating in different stages. And so I think it's important to be out there doing dating just to get practice, just to understand ourselves and who we are with other people. But I think it's also important to be honest. You could have been in a long-term marriage and it could have been over for 5 years, but you still were separated and not divorced yet. So when you're out there, you're really eager to connect. And I know that some of my first connections were just, I was looking for the opposite of my ex-husband. That wasn't necessarily a good match for me, but it was a good experience. And so understanding that somebody who's new to dating may not stay that long. But it may last. I feel like we have to really know the person that we're with. And I don't like to make big blanket statements and rules about who's ready, who's not ready. Just your example with your wife, she was on for 3 days and it turned out to be great. She had no idea what she was doing.
None.
And so if we go in, and I would say many of the stories in my book were surprises. They
Yep.
were not what we expected. And I say, like, people who are widowed, they may have had good marriages, they may have had bad marriages. We don't know until we ask. I dated a guy who was a widower, I guess they're called. And he was newly out of his marriage, but his wife had told him, you should go out and get laid, go out and
Right.
find somebody. And, it was one of her directives, which is true for a lot of people. Just get out there again. And so he took it literally and got out there so early on. And we became good friends. He's a really good person. He's dating somebody now, and it's been 2.5 years, and she was concerned that he wasn't ready. So I think that we have to know some people are ready, some people are not. And just be curious. You can feel if a person is in and then out, they're communicate and then they stop. Those are not good signs. So pay attention to what it feels like, back to the feelings. And if it doesn't feel good to you, talk about it. And if it doesn't work, it was a nice connection and move on.
How about, nowadays, a lot of the rules have been thrown out the window for the younger generations. The women pursue just as hard and just as much as the guys. The money thing, it's different. It's not like the guy pays for the dates and all of that. What are the issues that you run into with some of the folks you work with in terms of uh, when they get back out there and dating? Do they know like they can make the first move? Do the women know like, okay, he doesn't have to pay for everything, or I want him to pay for everything? Or how do they navigate the kind of new world of dating, if you will, if they've been out of the market for a while?
Good question. I think it is a confusing world we live in. And I suggest that people really think about what works for them today, not 30 years ago, because society may have told them that men chase. And I don't believe men should chase. I believe that women should make the first move, and then you miss all the chances you don't take. And so these women who come to me, they're not passive in the rest of their lives, but they are passive in their dating life, thinking, well, if he liked me, he would have asked me out already. Well, we don't know that. So I encourage women to be assertive, not aggressive, but assertive. And I encourage men to pay for women if the woman is willing to be paid for. Like I had a guy say to me, are you okay with me paying? I had never heard that one before.
Oh, that's a good one.
That was nice. I said, yes, I love to be treated. Thank you so much. So again, gratitude, just communicate. I like to be treated. It's really nice. It's but also if you offer, mean it. a lot of women will offer to pay and they get resentful that the man
Right.
says okay. So don't offer something that you don't want to follow through on. I think we just have to figure out what works for us. And I think a lot of men love when women ask them out, or when they make the first move, because they may not have even found them online, especially if the woman hadn't reached out first. And then I believe that women also should make the first move in getting off the app. It's like, this has been nice. I had a guy I was talking to who took like 10 days to get back to me after saying, let's make a plan and get together. And I thought he disappeared, like most people do. And he wrote back, oh, I'm sorry for the long delay, and totally didn't mention getting together, just mentioned his plans. And I said, hey, I thought you disappeared, as many do, and that's okay. But unless you're willing to get together, I'm going to move on. And how do you feel about that? What's your thoughts or whatever? I haven't heard from him. So
What did he
again,
say? What did he do? Just out of
he
curiosity, not to put you on the spot.
nothing. He did nothing. Not yet. The match is still open, but this happened last week, or a couple
You know
days
what?
ago.
To me, if I can chime in on this as a guy,
Yeah,
if he didn't immediately say, "I'm so sorry," absolutely, let's
yeah,
set it up right now.
yeah.
I would give him the heave
He's
ho in
out.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I believe you're right. And I give people a second chance, but
Mhm.
not a third chance. And so the only reason the match is still open is because I haven't gone online to close it. But I'm like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I want. But if you don't speak up, you don't know. And so, yes, the right person will say, I'm so sorry, let's get together. And the wrong one will just keep stringing you along. And don't get angry, just unmatch, move on, go with grace.
It sounds like also like these days there's a lot of people that go online and they want to find a partner supposedly, but they're juggling and they're going out with a lot of people because all of a sudden there's so many people available. If you're a guy, in the past you'd have to go up to somebody, after working out in the gym or at the bar. Hi, I'm Lou. Can I buy you a drink or something? Or do you want to dance or whatever it was back in the day? And nowadays it's not quite like that. And a lot of people see so many people available that they get overwhelmed. They're in the deep end of the pool. I found that one last anecdote about my own personal relationship, because I think it's helpful. My wife said to me, if you're still online, what are we doing here? I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, why don't we just go out with each other and see if it works and see how we feel? And if it works, it could work for a while, and then maybe it falls apart or not. But why don't we just do that? And I said, that's a novel idea, because I was happy as a clam because I was dating a lot of women. And I tried that, and like here I am years later. And it seemed like it's so simple, yet it makes sense. The question is, and forgive me for the long windup, do people sometimes over juggle, get too involved? They take on more than they bite off more than they can chew when it comes to dating.
I think some people do. I think in the people over 50 crowd, that's not happening as much.
Okay.
There aren't a lot of options of people that people are interested in. I think a lot of people are used to the old way of dating, only dating one person at a time. I think a lot of it has to do with your energy and the amount of energy you want to put towards dating, because it's a lot of energy to date a few people. I also think some people have sex too early on and they end up being involved with too many people and it doesn't feel safe. And so people have come to me after the fact. They've already started sleeping with someone, but they never had the exclusivity talk. They never talked about what they need in order to feel good in that relationship. And people are afraid to define relationships. I agree with your wife. I have done that when I've been messaging a few people, maybe going out with one or two. I quickly can see who it is that I want to focus on and just see where it goes. And I've brought it up after a couple of weeks, and the guy said, "Sure, let's do this." And but you don't know if they're willing until you talk about it. Women. So many women are afraid to ask for exclusivity. They think it's needy. And if the guy wanted to, he would have led with that. That's not true. I want people to really figure out what they want and not feel
Right.
like it's pushy or needy or weak to ask for what you want.
Mhm. I think you mentioned something really interesting, Sandy, when you said assertive versus aggressive. And I'm thinking about when we also talked about the first move, when it comes to initiating sex, intimacy for the first time, what do you advise your clients and what is their, just generalizing, but what do they kind of think? Is it the man to make the first move? Do they want to make the first move? And how do they do that? I remember on one of my last match dates, I was with a woman, she was over my place and she said, "Is that where you sleep?" And I figured that's it. I took the bait on that. I figured, okay. I said yes. Next thing you knew, we were there. So, but how do
Well,
you
you
advise?
had her in your house, so that was
Yeah,
also like a first
exactly.
step.
I'll tell you something. I had a place at the beach with a view of the ocean, and you know, I don't know how to say this without sounding wrong, but anytime I dated somebody and they went to that place, something happened. And I think the ocean was my friend. Let's put it that way, because people like to have a view of the, it just makes people feel totally relaxed. Anyways, how do you advise the ladies you work with in terms of managing the sex thing where they don't want to be a shrinking violet, if you will, but they don't want to be too aggressive?
I think make it known. I'm all about the green lights. So a lot of
Right.
women are too subtle. They don't give any indication that they're interested. Show your interest. Tell the person that you find them attractive,
Mhm,
that you're attracted not just to what they look like, but to who they are, who they've become.
mhm,
Engage with them so that they know that it's safe to make a move, and it's okay for women to make moves too. Like, you can go and hold his hand,
mhm,
you can start the whole thing. And
mhm.
for a lot of guys, especially people who haven't dated in a long time, they're scared,
Yeah.
and rejection is scary for people, like for men and for women.
Mhm.
And so nobody wants to be that vulnerable, but again, you miss all the chances you don't take. So if you're not letting somebody know by your actions, by your words, they will not know. And I have seen so many people at the end of a good first date say, "This was fun, thank you." Instead of saying, "I'd love to see you again.
Exactly.
I'd love to do this again." There's no indication. They probably say, "This was fun, thank you," to everyone.
That's amazing. Sandy Weiner, dating coach extraordinaire, author of the latest book, Love at Last. We're talking about that now. You talk about being vulnerable. What does that mean when you're dating, and why is that a good thing?
Being vulnerable is, again, talking about your feelings, talking about your heart, sharing some of your fears. And I believe we do that in layers. A lot of people start with the heavy stuff and the wounds and all the things that are actually off-putting, but share a little bit, share just a little bit about your passions. That's vulnerability. Share the goals that you have, share your pride in what you've accomplished since your divorce, picking yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, I love hearing people's stories of overcoming obstacles. That's vulnerability. Vulnerability is not sharing a pity story. It's
Mhm.
not sharing, I don't know what to do,
Right.
my kids are driving me crazy on a first date. Like, that's, I've had first phone calls where guys are telling me how many times they've been married, that their wife died of breast cancer, that lots of women at this stage in life are dying of breast cancer. I don't want to hear that on a first phone call. Really. It's not sexy.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Let's see this. Not you're not attracted to somebody initially at first. I sometimes what happens is that the longer people are kind of single and the older they get, they have their lists and there should be some must-haves there, of course, and hopefully they're value-based. But sometimes they don't realize that if you just go with your type, you may be missing out on something. How do you advise new daters, to keep an open mind?
Your type is scary. It's
Mhm.
it's based usually on something unhealthy that you're trying to heal. And there's a reason why you're not with your type, because The attraction is an attraction of deprivation, not inspiration. When
Uh-huh.
we heal, we are attracted to people who are healthier. And it doesn't happen with the same sparks and butterflies as that initial lusty kind of attraction that we were used to when we were younger. And many people still hold on to the rest of their lives. Most of the stories in my book are people who were outside the type, who did
Hmm.
not feel attracted at first. And the first story is one of my favorites, Karen CJ. She came in with, I'm not attracted to anyone. My
Right.
therapist told me I was
Exactly.
asexual.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't think you're asexual, but let's find out why you're not attracted to anyone. And so she wouldn't go on more than one date. She would just say, we're done. And this guy was persistent, he was patient, and I just officiated their wedding in Florida
Wow.
in September. Yeah, it was my first officiant job. It
Good.
was such an honor to go from I can't get past one date to marriage. And they love each other so much. She is so attracted to him now. But she had to let her guard down. She had a very tough first marriage. In fact, her father-in-law, her ex-father-in-law, and all of their family was at the wedding. And I was getting my car out of LA parking Sunday morning, and he was standing next to me, the father-in-law, and he said, we love Kara and we love CJ. And my son did not treat her well. And I'm sorry about that. But we love her so much. I mean, can you imagine
Amazing.
having in-laws, ex-in-laws at the wedding admitting that's how bad the marriage was, that they still love her and admit that their son did not do a good thing.
Mhm.
So she was dealing with all of that. And now she's in this amazing relationship. But it's not simple. You have to really work on yourself to overcome a lot of that stuff. And then every time he wouldn't do something that she thought he should be doing, she'd get mad, he would get mad, he would leave. They had to learn how to
Mhm.
do a lot of things differently. And I worked with them through the whole process from beginning to end. And now I just offered them some couples counseling post marriage because they're going through some stuff with their kids. So yeah, it's doesn't end.
Speaking of which, you have some good insights on fighting fair, and every couple, um, is going to get into some type of scraps on something. And to me, it's always about you don't have to agree on everything, but you have to find some type of consensus where you can keep going. Because what matters most, the overarching thing is, do I love this person? Do I want to be with them? We don't agree on this. How do we work this out? And then both people have to kind of be in agreement, a little give on both sides. I'm not saying compromise, I'm saying consensus. How do you advise people in terms of fighting fair?
Well, don't go into the defensiveness, the stonewalling, all of the ways that we ice people out, because that just shuts the door. And in order to resolve conflict, you have to both be willing, like you said, value the relationship first, because the intention that you set makes for a safe conversation. I think a lot of people feel very unsafe in conflict. I was just actually watching Love is Blind from this season, and there's one couple where the guy shut down after their first argument. He said he thought it was going to be their last conversation. And this was the first time they had a difference of opinion, and they had just started to get to know each other. This couple was doomed from the start because that's his argument style. So like a week later, they had
Mhm.
another argument, and he was so nasty. I mean, he just walked away from the relationship. It's an indication that, this is not
Right.
him being justified. This is him not being able to handle conflict. So learn how to fight fair, learn how to talk without accusing, learn how to use I statements. And really, again, we're talking about feelings, because if you're not clear with what your feelings and your needs are
Mhm.
and make it about yourself, you will end up accusing the other person and alienating them. And
Mhm.
then curiosity. Like, we have to be curious what the other person meant, because we
Right.
may have totally misinterpreted it. And then sometimes you can't reach an agreement. And there are a lot of things that couples will never
Mhm.
agree on. And that's okay too. As long as you don't let it fester,
Right.
you can move on.
Mhm. How about proximity? One of the couples in your book, one was in Italy and the other one was in the United States, and she didn't speak Italian and he didn't speak English, something to that effect. They they had two separate languages, so not only did they have to Zoom each other, they had to like work with the language, two different languages. How about? I mean, is this something practical, or like to me it was like I can see how that can happen, but I can go to Trader Joe's if I want to meet a woman, and probably just ask about is the is the squash fresh today or something, whatever. There's easy ways to break into a conversation with an open-ended question. It seems like people are going to lengths and there's so much distance there. Do you think that's by design, and how do you advise people like that?
Well, if you don't have a butternut squash connection, then but seriously, that couple that you were talking about, I worked with her for many years and she was really unique. She was a person who was extremely deep and self-aware. She also loved to travel and she did speak fluent Italian, by the way. She had spent a year in Italy or more doing graduate work. So her whole dream was to travel.
Okay.
She went to Italy because COVID had ended and she went to travel with her friend, ended up at this place by accident because of the weather and booking issue. And it was the home of somebody who made these big dinner parties. She put her with this man who spoke Italian, and it was an immediate connection. So she didn't go with the intention of finding a boyfriend in Italy.
Gotcha.
She went because she wanted to travel.
Okay.
But and it wasn't simple because he had a partner and he had to dissolve this relationship. Over time, it became apparent, but they started their relationship on Skype to practice
Okay.
speaking their languages.
Mm.
So sometimes, again, that was an openness. She was concerned about the fact that he had a partner and was coaching with me. And she said, "Am I crazy?" And I said, "You know what? You're enjoying getting to know him. If you can not attach to the outcome, you're going to have a better time of it. Don't try to force something." And then it happened. And she's blissfully happy and feels like everybody deserves this. But for many, many years, and I can relate to this, if you are a really bright, interesting person who's not typical, it's harder to find a match. And it's
Mhm.
harder to find somebody who's at Trader Joe's, like, or at the gym or anywhere else. But do get out and meet people. And then there was another couple who he was in Uruguay and she was in Florida. And that was his vacation home. So he did live in Florida and ended up coming back, and now they live together. So there has to be an end game. It
Gotcha.
can't, it'll work for people, but I think the main thing is don't limit yourself to a 5 mile radius. If
Mhm.
you're not finding matches and you're really diligent about looking and being open, then be open to meeting somebody while you're on a vacation or anything else.
No, I think that's fantastic. I didn't mean to denigrate their wonderful relationship. I think it's fabulous. I just thought it was funny because they spent a lot of time on Zoom. I think it said 100 hours or something, and it's like, wow, let's get these people together. Let's make it happen. I knew somebody I used to work with, and she told me that she was single. She said 3 subway stops. That's it.
Yeah,
If you're further than that, it's over. So
right.
there's I guess that's part of the must-haves and how long your list is going to be, because I agree with you. You need to be open-minded, and I think this was very adventurous, and I'm so glad that it worked out. So,
Yeah, well, it's kind of like with COVID, where people couldn't meet right away and
right.
they got to know each other very deeply. And I believe that a lot of amazing relationships happened because of the fact that everything else was taken off the table. We didn't have sex, we didn't have who pays on a first date, we didn't have first dates. So we made Zoom dates and we got creative. And people met and were able to really understand who the other person was. That was kind of the Uruguay couple.
Mhm.
They were older, they were both widowed, and they had so much in common that they spent hours and hours until he was going to come back to Florida. So that was a unique experience, and not everybody would have the patience to do that. They want to meet within, two
Exactly.
messages and we're meeting or move on.
Okay. Final question, real quick response, if you will, because we're tight on time. Best relationship advice, people over 40 getting back out into the market. what do you tell them? One thing.
Have a growth mindset. Be open. Anything could happen.
Right? Green lights, not red lights, right?
That's right.
Love it. Okay. Sandy Weiner, author of Love at Last. It's a great book. It's got 18 stories and a lot of great lessons at the end of each chapter about what people should be considering when they're going in different types of dates and different situations. You covered it all here. Sandy, tell everybody where they can learn more about you, where they can find you, where they can take your courses.
All right. Thank you, Robert. I am at lastfirstdate.com, and you can find all my social media there. I have a tab called Courses and Books, and I have a tab called Podcasts. You can find everything, blogs, YouTube, I'm everywhere.
Great. Thank you so much for being back on Guys Radio. You're a friend of the show, and you're a wonderful person, and you're a beautiful person, and keep doing what you're doing because you're helping a lot of folks out there.
Thank you, Robert.
If you enjoyed the guests and content I bring you each and every week to Guys TV and Guys Radio, please support us by subscribing to our channels and platforms. Thank you.